Patreon. Did Jesus Exist series. We are MythVision. Did Jesus Exist with Robert M. Price. We dealt with Josephus. We dealt with Tacitus. Now, let's dig into other sources that people put up there as historical sources for Jesus' existence, like Suetonius, Pliny, Lucius, I think you said Lucian, and other people you can come to mind. How do you deal with these people, and what's the issues at hand?
Well, they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel with these. In Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Caesars, he says that something that the book of Acts also mentioned, that Claudius expelled the Jews from Rome because of the rioting occasioned or instigated by one Chrestus, with an E instead of the I, which might be another version of Christos, but it was a widely attested common name that meant the good or the useful. In fact, the Marcionites in the 2nd century called Jesus Christus, the good one, not a Messiah, because they didn't believe that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. Anyway, in fact, it was a common name for slaves, and it meant something like a plasterer, and so forth. Now, this would imply, if that's supposed to be Jesus, you got a whole lot of rewriting to do, because it implies, it doesn't say at the instigation of Christians, it says the instigation of one Chrestus. Does that mean that Jesus was active in Rome in Claudius's time? Well, Irenaeus thought that Jesus did die under Claudius, not Tiberius. That's an interesting little question. You mean they couldn't even keep straight when he supposedly lived? Epiphanius and others thought he was killed by Alexander Jannaeus, Hasmonean king in the 2nd century BC. I've always wondered, suppose were these people like the idiots that Jay Leno and Jesse Waters interviews on the street? They don't know what century the Civil War happened in. How could they not have kept this straight? Anyway, this assumes Jesus was some sort of rabble-rouser in Rome, and even if he wasn't, that shows you how distorted the thing could be. But there's just no reason to think that they are referring to Jesus or Christians. So that one's off the table. Pliny the Younger wrote a letter, if this is authentic. There is a letter in the collection of his letters where he's writing to the Emperor Trajan, I believe. And he's saying, boy, I got all these Christians. I think we're supposed to persecute them, but I don't really know much about them, so I've dragged a few in and interrogated them, and they tell me that they meet early in the morning every day and take an oath to only do good, and so on, and they sing a hymn to Christos as to a god. He says they don't seem to be making any trouble, but I'm alarmed because so many people are converting from paganism that the meat markets are suffering. People are not buying sacrificial meat anymore. That makes me think this is spurious, that it's one of the many things Christians wrote as if it were an emperor writing and saying, I don't know why we're persecuting these Christians. So I think that it's not authentic, but even if it is, again, that tells us nothing about a historical Jesus. Does anybody doubt that in the 2nd century Christians were worshiping Christ as a god? It just doesn't bear on it. Lucian of Samosata, the great cynical satirist, he wrote really interesting stuff. He mentions in a work called The Passing of Peregrinus. There was this Cynic philosopher called Proteus and Peregrinus. And Proteus might have been a nickname because he was the shape-shifting god, and this guy went through such different stages in his career. But he was a cynic and famous for it, but then for a while converted to Christianity and wrote documents that are now deemed as second only to those of the founder of the Christian sect. As I remember, there's no mention of any name there. In fact, it's not unlikely he's confusing Proteus with Paul, whose writings were considered second only to the Gospels, right? And he tells about the martyrdom of this guy and so on. But that's hardly a mention. I mean, people assumed the Christians had a founder. That's no big news. Oh, who else? Sometimes apologists refer to a guy named Mara ben Serapion, in other words, Lord, son of Serapion, who was named after the god Serapis. Anyway, this guy is writing to his son, and he says how the wise always get killed by those in power. And he mentions Socrates and somebody or other else, and he says the wise king of the Jews who was put to death. Well, I admit that kind of sounds like they're talking about Jesus, but there is no name and there's no way to date this writing. So once again, it's simply irrelevant. What this tells you is that if this is the best you've got nothing. It reminds me of when people say, hey, look at this. In the Holy Land, they found a doorknob shaped like a pomegranate. Didn't they have those in Solomon's temple, according to the Bible? Well, there you go. Solomon's temple, it's no myth. Is that all you found of it? Did they send angels to vacuum up the rest of the ruins of the giant temple? Is this it? I mean, if this were a piece of the Temple of Solomon, there'd be a lot more. And the same thing here. You're bragging, oh yeah, Jesus was commonly mentioned by writers of the period. No, he's not. And you can, these people cite these ancient writings in the same way they cite the Bible. It's just proof texting, and it's their dogma. The defense of the faith, the defense of the Bible has become the Bible. They have to do apologetics for their apologetics, and it's just bad argumentation. There's nothing wrong with the evidence. It's simply being invoked falsely. Thou shalt not take the evidence in vain.